So let me set the stage here. We all have to refer to this thing called the COVID-19. So I have that there. Maybe I should rewrite it as COVID-19 Delta variant now. Everyone understands collaboration is a common model now in terms of research and education, right? So we all know that. In the chat, I know you are not allowed to talk or raise hands. I cannot see if you're raising hands because I'm in a full screen mode. If you all agree, you can probably say agree to the third thing that came there. There's a gap in what educators and schools provide, what students need, right, and what the society expects. So if you all agree, you can simply write agree in the chat. I just want to see how many agrees come there. Peter can let me know later. Okay. Now, there is a tremendous need for technology platforms. We have seen that even during the pandemic. Yes, everyone uses Zoom. Maybe some of them use WebEx if they can afford it, or Microsoft Teams. Now, the entire focus when we are doing transdisciplinary research and education, this is where the theme would come into play as I go along, is the focus on skills and activities. TRE is transdisciplinary research and education, and they play a very important role. And then I'm sure all educators here agree that the benefits of student-centered learning go beyond outcomes, right? We are all used to talking about regular outcomes, but we are talking about really building metacognitive abilities. So we'll kind of look at what some of those things are. Okay. One more setting the stage. Again, wanted to make this an interactive session. So you can always put something in the chat. That's the only way of interacting at the moment while I'm presenting this. What comes to mind when you look at these apps, Uber or Amazon or Netflix or DoorDash? At least a couple of you might be thinking this: a very convenient user experience, right? It's so easy to order Uber, so easy to order stuff from Amazon. If you look at their app interfaces, they have made it so ridiculously easy. There's a movement, at least here in Silicon Valley, where corporations are trying to build solutions which are more consumer type of user experiences, which have those types of experiences. So that is a critical differentiator. And then the claim that I am making here is institutions, whether they are corporations or educational institutions, if they can Uberize and deliver a compelling, convenient experience. In the case of our education institution, it is students, right? Students, educators, and faculty. They would have a significant competitive advantage. Not competitive advantage in terms of competing with other universities or something. It's more like a compelling thing where students say, aha, we are really learning great. Everything about this is so convenient, right? That is the background in whatever I do these days. Okay, so let me give you a few examples of what we mean by transdisciplinary. Right? So I chose two examples. One is an example called decline in fish population, and then the other one is channel incentives. As Ellie alluded to when she was introducing me, that is what I do for a living. My team developed a solution for Cisco in channel partner incentives. We maintain that ecosystem, as Ellie was alluding to. So I'm going to give you a small example from that domain. Okay, let's look at decline in fish population. That's actually a research project. Okay, here is the problem. This happened in I believe in a Swedish town somewhere. I don't remember the full details, but in that town, the fishermen noticed a sharp decline in fish catches. Now, big deal about that is it was revenue impacting to the city because these anglers, When they catch fish, they sell, they pay taxes. So all that revenue was getting impacted at the town level too, right? Because they're all selling fishing licenses. If the fish catch is reduced, not many people will come take licenses and so on. Now, that is a complete representation of a transdisciplinary problem. Okay? And we'll see what we mean by that in 1 second. So they put together a core team of people. And then the goal was, they established goals actually. They said, okay, let's document the size of the fish stocks and their health. Identify causes for decline in fish population. Okay? And then obviously, once you identify the problems, you want to come up with solutions or countermeasures to remedy the situation. Now, I want you to think for a few seconds, why is this a big deal, right? Now look at this one, the people who participated in solving the problem. Okay? You had people from the city government or the town, right? You needed business representatives because they have problems from their perspective. You have the federal government because it's an environmental issue. Maybe the lake is poisoned. That's why the fish are dying. Who knows, right? And then you had a whole bunch of research institutions and scientists from different disciplines, right? You had academic people from fisheries science, environmental chemistry. You can see all the different branches of a typical university. And most importantly, you had the society stakeholders, the fishermen themselves, and the conservation groups, the authorities, right? Fishery authorities. Even people like operators from sewage treatment plants, right? So you can see what does this tell us, right? All of a sudden, this is no longer an isolated problem. This is a society impacting problem. That's one of the key takeaways of a transdisciplinary environment. Number two, it is not viewed at it from one type of people's perspective. It is viewed at it from different perspectives. They all bring different ideas. They all think the problem is because of that. So all of a sudden, you have an ecosystem of people coming from different disciplines, working together to solve a society problem. That, in essence, represents a transdisciplinary collaboration. Okay? Now, what do? In the case of fish population, these are the activities that they undertook. They did a lot of joint meetings among participants to discuss their perspectives, why the catch declined. Different people give different explanations. That is point number two. Okay. Now, all these people got together and each of them put together different causes of the fish catch decline. And the way they did it, because we are all in a way scientists, in the form of hypothesis, right? And they shared a lot of documents, they did a lot of discussions in the process. Okay. Now, how did they arrive at the hypothesis? There's a lot of mutual learning. When I'm an engineer coming and talking to a doctor about a problem, I have to understand the doctor's language. I have to learn from their perspective, and they have to understand what I'm saying as an engineer. If I'm doing something like a healthcare initiative, right, where we are doing some technology solutions in healthcare. Okay? So you have all these people coming together, and then how do you arrive at a solution, right? How do you agree on things? In this particular case, they did majority voting. Okay? So, and then notice point number 7 there is 77 sub-projects were created. You thought, hey, it's a simple problem, but you can imagine how many projects got created. That shows the complexity of the problem. Okay? And then last but not least, they were in constant touch and in discussions with the stakeholders of the society. That's one example. Second one, I would not spend too much time on it in the interest of time. I want to make sure I cover everything on time here. Okay. So here is the problem from the industry, where my team was entrusted with the task of creating a new incentive solutions for channel partners. The goal was to replace an existing outdated solution. We needed to automate everything in terms of rewards. And then last but not least, they wanted to reinvent the partner's ease of doing business. Remember, I talked about convenience? That's what they were emphasizing. Look at even in the industry, right? It's not an academic problem. It is the same situation repeats itself both in the academia, research organizations, and in the case of industry too. You can see I have program teams who run the different partner programs, your IT, teams from marketing, all kinds of disciplines here, including legal, finance, and so on, right? Similar to what we saw in fish, different types of people. The problem is global in nature. Rather, it's not an isolated problem. That's what I mean by it's not necessarily global. It is still local to that region, but it requires different perspectives to understand before we can solve it. Now, if you look at the activities, pretty much similar. Whatever I showed you in the previous example is exactly what we have done here. So this is not theory, this is really practical. That's what I want you to understand here. Okay. Now, I should give credit to Ellie for this particular slide because I was reviewing this one and then she said, hey, why don't you add your slide on problem solving framework? How do you solve a problem? This is very relevant to educators as well. Okay. So here is a problem solving framework that I developed where, of course, we start with a problem statement. And then there's a phase called project design where initially you form a core team to understand the problem better and to figure out some additional details related to the project. And then you get into the technical design phase where we assemble more extended teams. Then you get more into joint problem and project definitions, right? And then you figure out how to do communications. How do you do assessments and surveys? Now, in the back of my mind, you're thinking, hey, why is this important to me as an educator? That's what you will hopefully take away at the end of this presentation. These are all the things that you can actually simulate in a classroom environment to train your students to become transdisciplinary thinkers. Okay. The output of that, ultimately, my goal in my case was to arrive at a tool. That's the reason why you see this particular output with specific text, where I always come up with activity and sub-activities. Once I know what are my activities and what my sub-activities are, then I can enter that information into a tool, and that is what hopefully I can demonstrate to you at the end of this presentation. Ellie, are we doing good on time? I assume we are. Okay, so what is the educator's role, right? To help create this transdisciplinary thinkers and scientists. What can we do? We are all educators here. This is an e-learning conference. By the way, talking about e-learning conference, as Margaret said, today's session is all about gamification. The industry example that I showed you is full of gamification. I'm very much deeply involved in gamification as an industry guy. And gamification is another big name. It is nothing but really gamification is all about how do you motivate and inspire your audience to do certain or to execute certain behaviors. And the same thing applies both in the academic world and in the industrial world too. Okay. So this is what I think educators' role ought to be, or these are some of the things that I gathered. It's not just I think. A lot of great experts in the academic world said so. Okay, so my role here as a facilitator, I'm kind of collating all this, if you will. Transition from traditional knowledge mediator to a coach and process facilitator. This is no longer like a teacher comes with a whole bunch of slide decks and say, guys, this is what I'm going to present, and next week I'm going to give a quiz on that. That paradigm has to change. Change is the name of the game, as I alluded to in the very first slide when I showed you the Greek philosophers thing. Okay? You have to partner with students. The mindset is different now. All of a sudden, I'm saying, don't think of us being the teacher, and it's not a hierarchical thing. It's truly a partnership with the students. So it's a change in mindset. What do we mean by that? You will see that in the next slide. Same thing. You have to partner with faculty across disciplines, because you're training scientists to think holistically, not disciplinary focused, but multidisciplinary or beyond disciplinary focus. So how do you partner with faculty? That means you are, for example, if you have a course design which has a project, maybe the project spans multiple disciplines, and your students who are working on this project have to go talk to people from other disciplines. So you need to figure out those kinds of things. And remember, I gave you examples where society stakeholders were very much involved. You have to partner with them too. Okay? So what does it all lead to? You have to rethink your learning objectives, course and curriculum design. Right? Pretty good, nice framework, if you will, a cheat sheet. I call this more like a cheat sheet as an educator. When I'm doing these things, I'll remember this and I'll create my curriculum or the course design accordingly. Okay, so here is one example. It's an illustration only. Don't beat me up on that. I have some learning outcomes here. Okay? If you notice it, it's all about transdisciplinary, right? I'm training transdisciplinary scientists of tomorrow. So they should know how to analyze and define complex problems collaboratively. They should know how to share knowledge. When you're collaborating with people, sharing knowledge is important. They should know how to do group discussions. Believe it or not, it's a skill to do group discussions meaningfully. Okay? How do you co-produce knowledge? Right? And then how can you contribute to communities of practice? In a way, this e-learning is a community of practice, that this particular conference. So you are all familiar with that. So these are the learning outcomes that I want to bring to the table as an educator in my classroom. Now, what are the other metacognitive capabilities, if you will? Writing, mutual learning, critiquing, reflection. These two things are so important, critiquing and reflection. Of course, every single bullet point is important, but this is something that is absolutely critical to bring to a classroom environment in an e-learning space as well. So in the back of your mind, you must be thinking, hey, am I doing all of these things in my course? If you are doing it, you are already a great leader in that. If you are not, perhaps you can learn something new. Now, how do I design my course? Here is just a quick guideline. Again, as I said, it's an illustration. So how do I make my students learn something about how to define a complex problem? Obviously, that is a topic for day one, let's say that, right? So I would give some definition of what a complex problem is. I give them examples, then I can say, hey, let each student write a complex problem statement and discuss with a peer in the classroom. Do they agree that it's a complex problem or not? Okay. Then you lead a group discussion as an educator. You review a few answers and engage in class discussion, right? And then remember, we talked about a core team is forming. So I said, okay, I'm going to give an assignment saying, hey, you all talk amongst yourselves and form a team and submit a complex problem. See, I'm not defining a complex problem. I'm making the student define their own complex problem. Slight change in mindset. That's why I said I view myself as a facilitator and a coach, as opposed to saying giving one-way information to them. Then, so how do I make them understand or get practice on joint problem definition, right? So I'm saying, okay, go define the problem with the stakeholder input. That means it has to be a society impacting problem. Now, as an educator, you must thinking this Pratap is telling us giving us too much work. Yes, it is too much work, but it is fun work, right? You are making a difference to train next generation leaders, right? Same thing, how do I bring mutual learning to a classroom environment? I say let two teams each interact and learn about their respective complex problems assignment, right? So pretty self-explanatory. Right? And then to facilitate the discussion, to engage the classroom, we talk about gamification. So this is, you can see the elements of gamification here. right, in the mutual learning. Now I'm going to create an assignment in a discussion forum where I grade them on how well they are doing the discussions, right? Okay. So let me check the time. Ellie, I hope we are doing good on time. Yeah, I think we are still doing okay. Let me take a sip of water. Now, what role does technology play? We are all used to Zoom here. We are in fact using Zoom today, right? Now, it's not as simple as simply using Zoom. Does Zoom provide all the things to facilitate this in a classroom? I'm not sure. Okay. So there has to be some kind of a formal way of understanding the role of technology. I went deep into what that formal analysis is, doing some systematic literature review and all of that stuff. I cut out all of those things for the presentation, but some glimpses here. Now, these things that you see in the middle, the video conferencing learning communities, these are all the different technologies that are available to us, right? So how do I use them? In which context we use them? Okay. And my needs as an educator are
4 minutes.
I have 4 minutes. Okay, perfect. So I have online meetings. I need to do discussions, co-produce, all of these activities that I do, right? And then joint problem definition. These are all the things that I mentioned to you earlier, right? And I can map them here to all of these things, different technologies, right? So I do that, and then I get into, okay, now I know what are my requirements, what technologies I need. So I want to evaluate the platforms, which are the right platform for me to use as an educator. I mean, oftentimes if your organization already has something, you're bound to it. But this is more an academic discussion, an academic conference. So I'm laying out the groundwork here. So you analyze what your needs are. You arrive at activity and sub-activity list. And once you know what your activities and sub-activities are, you log into the tool and enter those things, and then you look at the evaluation results. Very simple, okay? So when I give you an illustration, if you go back to the decline in fish population that I talked about, this is what I have done. These are all the activities, and these are all the sub-activities. Team formation, problem definition, team assembly. What kind of activities really go in terms of that?
I made a mistake. We are finishing at 9:30, so I thought it was 10 minutes, 4 minutes to 10. So continue gradually, and we will have plenty of time for discussion. Sorry, you have a lot of time. It's still not 10 o'clock.
No problem.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Ellie. As I said, I can do this presentation in 10 minutes or 1 hour or 1 day too. So with the same set of slides. Okay. So you can see here, when we talk about the fish population, Ellie has motivated me. You can see that in my tone too now, right? I have more time. So when I talked about fish population, remember we talked about different types of teams, different people coming, but there's a core team that came first, right? So what do they have to do? So you bring something, okay, we have to communicate the research goal and objectives, right? And they have to collaborate with core team members. Now, team assembly is where you're forming extended teams. Remember, the decline in fish population had 77 sub-projects. That's a lot of teams, okay? So how do you create all of those things? There's a lot of discussion that goes on. When there are that many teams, you have to upload a lot of project documents, okay? Now, in terms of problem definition, you have to support both synchronous and asynchronous learning, because sometimes you get into Zoom synchronous and you learn, and sometimes you have to update your material and use discussion forums to do the learning, right? So that is how you come up with all these activities and sub-activities. Now, when you have extended teams, how do you integrate all of those things, right? So you have to figure out how to facilitate integration of multiple perspectives. How do you critique? Remember, I talked to you about the metacognitive skills, critiquing and reflection. How do you do critiquing and reflection, right? Of course, communication is something that everyone seems to be reasonably okay now in terms of email and group and chat and all that, right? Now, assessments. As an educator or as a researcher, how do I assess my project progress? Very important for us as educators in this conference, right? What kind of feedback mechanisms I would have, right? What kind of group surveys I need to do. So all these things that I listed in the sub-activities, activity, sub-activity, pretty much each and every bullet point is applicable to an educator who is designing a course or a curriculum in today's world. Okay. Now here is a small snapshot of the software tool itself, which I'm going to show in 1 second. It basically what you're doing there is once you have identified your activity and sub-activities, you use the tool to go enter it. Okay. And then once you enter it, it is going to give you the results. As you can see here, we evaluated Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, Google Classroom, Moodle, and Blackboard. Pretty much almost all of you would know these tools. I don't think I put the score there, did I? No. But I'll let you imagine which one will come out on top. I won't say that. Okay. So that concludes the formal presentation. I always like to end my presentations with two nice quotes. One is this one, I'm still learning. Michelangelo apparently said that at 87, at age 87. I came to know of this quote more than 25 years ago. I really like that. So learning never stops. So we as educators here in today's conference, for us also learning never stops. We can always learn something new and impart more and more knowledge and wisdom to our students. And then to me, all this, as we learn, we begin a new journey. So this is a very famous quote. I'm sure all of you know that. So let me pause here for 1 quick second, see if I can show you the tool. Bear with me for a second. I already cheated a little bit. I ran the results, so I'm just going to show you. Ellie, you can see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Great. So here is a tool that we developed as part of my PhD dissertation in the last minute because one of the committee members said we would like to see a tool. Since we are software hackers and we were able to do that. I'm warning you, this is for illustration only. This is not an industry tool. People who have seen it, they wanted to use it actually, and I'm very open to giving it away to develop it further. In case if some of you are interested, Texas Tech University themselves, they are very interested, and I'm working with a professor there to use some computer science students to continue to expand this tool. And I can do the same with all of you, including Middlesex LA and Solvent University, Margaret. So when we do the tool, of course, we always go beyond the initial scope. I can actually select different categories, meaning different domains. Think of it as different domains. And then I can, what I'm showing you is the user interface only, not the admin interface. I can actually define these categories as an admin on the back end. And where as part of the definition, I can say, okay, these are my activities on the left, like team formation, assemble team, and these are my sub-activities there. So imagine if it is your domain, as an administrator, I can go and rewrite all of these things which meet your domain needs. That's number one. I want you to take it away. I'm not logged in as admin, but we can do that. Now, once we do that, then you can see which of these sub-activities are required, like must have or nice to have or don't care. You don't need to have anything fancy more than that, right? Do I really need to have it, or is it nice, or I don't care? You fill those things out for each of these categories. The default, of course, is don't care, right? By the way, all these categories are applicable in the education setting because what I did was in research and education, right? So, and if you want to add your own things, you can add, and then you hit the evaluate button, and then And obviously, I chose some random things here. Literally, before 20 minutes before you all joined, we wanted to just test it out. Obviously, based on my randomness, where I chose some of them as must-have, some of them as don't care, and some of them are nice to have. Turns out no tool really met all my requirements. That's just a coincidence, okay? Because we chose something in random. Ellie and Margaret know that. But you can see how beautiful the results show, right? Whether a certain tool met that requirement or not, right? If it did not met, it's an X. If it met, it's a check mark, right? But you can see like a double check mark here in this case, right? The very first double check mark, column B under Microsoft Teams. Even though the ask is not a must-have, the platform provides this requirement. So by doing this one, what it does at the top here is it gives them a score. Okay. So based on the score, of course, you make the decision which platform to select. So that is what this tool is. And then it also shows like, okay, if my skill requirements, yeah, you can see the score here, right? Based on what I selected, you can see Google Meet, of course, did not. Google Meet is a great meeting tool, but it's not an education tool other than lecturing. Teams, Microsoft Teams seems to be doing okay, but Google Classroom is very good. Moodle, you can see Moodle and Google Classroom and Blackboard. These three are pretty much, at least based on what I selected, they seem to be scoring pretty good. Okay. So you can actually play with the tool. If somebody wants to play with the tool, I can just send me a request and I can ask my engineer to set you up, and then you can play with it more and see if it meets your needs. Okay, so that ends my formal presentation. I'm happy to take questions and make it more a dialogue where it's a conversation, right? As opposed to calling it questions, it can be comments. You can share your wisdom with us. This is all about sharing knowledge and wisdom and mutual learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradap. And I'm sorry I interrupted your train of thought by panicking you about time. We have plenty of time for discussion, and I, for one, have a lot of questions, but I'm going to go last. Just let all the others that have posted questions on chat. Over to you, Peter.
I've got no questions on chat at the moment, so
they can speak as well now. Yeah, they can unmute and speak too if they have comments to make.
Margaret, well, people can unmute themselves, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, they can.
They can.
They can.
Yes, they can. But Ellie, if you have your question first to get people going.
No, I think you should go last. Better for the audience.
In which case, we've got anyone with any questions?
Well, I have one.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you for your very interesting presentation and multidisciplinary and practical knowledge. And I would like just to ask you, since you have a problem-solving approach, and you originate your approach also from ancient Greek philosophy about change and Heraclitus, I would like to ask you, what about question asking skill and competency? Where do you have it? This is Socrates, but which is necessary for problem solving, in real problem solving, and also is a little bit of this Rudyard Kipling's approach about the 6 honest serving men: what, why, how, when, and where. So, but I would like something to hear from your culture, how you integrate and find transdisciplinary knowledge, because it's very important when we have different cultural teams, geographically dispersed, do you have some approach that you try to encapsulate it with your current project management problem solving teams? And that has to do with question asking in problem solving.
So if I mean, yours is more a comment as opposed to a question too, right? So
both, they're both.
Both, yeah, they're both.
Some example, for example, where about you use it, because the tool itself, I didn't say exact questions, but I suppose they are questions behind what you presented.
Yeah.
And if you
Correct.
from the teams and the curriculum outcomes, for example, are there some question asking skill as teaching the question asking?
Absolutely. There are question asking skills which are implied in what I presented, considering the time. But definitely we'll use that framework to come up with all the questions. There's no doubt about that. But the trick here is, typically when they talk about the question and answer framework model, they're always assuming that there's only one person who is asking the questions and trying to get the answers from others. But that is not true in a collaborative world, right? You have people coming from different disciplines. So, and the question answer becomes a collective knowledge sharing session as opposed to a hierarchical way of doing it. So that's why this group discussion becomes very important in the collaborative world. Now, how do I translate that to an education paradigm? Let me put it in the context of education, right? Remember, I talked about how the educator's role has to change now, right? So this is not teacher telling them, here is the course, here are the assignments, here is the project, right? All of a sudden, they're partnering with the students. Remember, I said one of the things they're partnering with the students. So it is now the teacher in collaboration with the students, they are defining the assignments and the projects. That is a significant paradigm shift. Now, that is not traditional teaching and learning, right? So how do we achieve that, right? Are we ready to do that? Now, I don't know about British thing. In India, I don't know how it is in India. I can tell you in US. I've always taught my courses where my things are always open book, open notes, take home. When I used to do that, faculty might say, how do you monitor whether they're cheating or not, right? How do you assess them? I say, because I'm actually making them think. They are defining their own problem. They are coming up with their own solution. So I'm looking at their critical thinking and analyzing capability as opposed to saying them, okay, here is 2 + 2, tell me the answer, right? So I'm in the process of employing these types of paradigm shifts. I'm not even worried about would people cheat, right? And then they are doing mostly project-based work. And then I'm emphasizing presentation and roles and responsibilities. Remember, we talked about project teams and facilitators. Each of them has a role. So I ask them, okay, what is the role that you play in the project? So my questions would be related to the role. So I'm never worried about cheating or any kind of copying and any of those things, right? So this is where I'm partnering with them. Yes, it is more work for me as an educator, but guess what? At the end of the course, the students are so confident in tackling problems, right? They know how to think. They know how to formulate a problem. They know how to talk to a stakeholder. So that is what I'm trying to arrive at here.
Right. Okay, thank you. I asked you because it haunts me a little, because with e-learning and COVID-19, we have found out, and tomorrow will be a presentation about that question asking skill is difficult to exercise with e-learning. That's clear.
Correct.
So it was a comparative research done, and in many different levels of education. Primary education, for example, between Turkey and Greece appeared, and then appeared also in university education, and appeared in special skills education, for example. So I see also myself as a trainer, when I train people about cybersecurity seminars, that it's very difficult to exercise this question asking skill online. So I'm looking forward to meet people face to face, and also business people do not they want to ask questions and they stop because of security problems. I have, for example, after 2 weeks, a tutorial, let's say online workshop with the banking sector in Denmark. I'm in Finland, and they were very reluctant because of the traveling restrictions to have it online, because we cannot ask real questions because of security problems, because we cannot see security problems. They don't want to reveal them online. They don't want to ask and discuss also. So I see it everywhere that there are restrictions in e-learning or online or whatever learning. So I really wanted to put it on board as a question, and that's why I asked you. I hope that other people might have some comment on that. But thank you very much. It was very interesting, your approach and your reflection to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Ellie, you had a question, didn't you?
Yes, I do. I'm very interested in this creation of several teams because of huge problems like the fishing industry and that sort of not individual problem, but a big problem. And there you have all those disciplines that you listed there, about 6, 7, 8 disciplines. Everybody has their own language, everybody has their own culture, terminology, and everything. And you will give them the tool, they will do an analysis, maybe, they have their meetings, but there are conflicts, and someone needs to make some decision in the end to resolve the conflicts at individual level, at group level, and at the whole of the group. How do you go about that? Because that is that many disciplinaries, many cultures, many languages, terminology, technical terminology, they all look at the same problem, but they have a different view and different approach. How are you going to reconcile all of those?
Yeah, so one of the first things, that's a great question. I'm also looking at another question in the chat. I'll come to that in a minute. Ellie, what you asked is a great question, because one of the things that we do when we are doing these complex projects is establishing a common glossary of terms. You need to have a common terminology. When you are bringing different people together from different disciplines, they have to agree on the terminology first, right? To address your question. So that way there is no confusion there. Now, as for how the decisions are made, the same thing. If you look at going back to the fish example, what did they all agree on? Democracy wins, majority voting wins, right? So they came up with a mechanism to say, okay, we have these competing things. How do we arrive at the decision? Majority voting, right? Whatever voting scheme is agreeable to the team, they have to agree to that. So they have to establish that baseline decision-making process. That framework they have established. So I hope that answers your question.
So you do terminology management at the beginning?
Absolutely.
But they merge, many of these differences emerge in the discussion. The differences.
Go ahead, I lost you there.
During the discussion, even if you had a common glossary, a common terminology, and you managed that at the beginning, during the discussion, the solutions they come up with, the approaches are different. Then there is conflict. So how do you reconcile the conflict?
The way, I mean, it depends again. I mean, how I do it in the industry is different, right?
Yeah, because in the industry.
This is a big problem in the industry, right? Like, for example, right now I'm developing a product called the incentives product, Rewards Cloud. So I have 3 architects working on the product. Now, no 2 architects agree on a solution. We all know that, right? On top of it, I have 3 of them. I have to reconcile all of those things, right? There are different techniques that I use to reconcile them. Ultimately, I'm the business owner, right? So somebody still has the business owner, and they can override everything, right? So you need to have that mechanism in place to be able to do that. But I'm not an autocrat. But the way I do that, there's a method to madness, as we say, right? So the way I do it, I abstract it out in terms of my business requirements, right? What is the problem that we are solving for a customer, right? In the case of educator, the customer is really the student, right? Or maybe in the case of a researcher, it may be some government institution. So you have to look at it from the perspective of who you're solving it for. That is the approach that I would take. Now, I want to quickly pivot to this comment that is there in the chat, who said there has to be weightage to the, who said that? From weightage to the attributes in the tool. Regarding the tool, some requirements, Harjinder, you are absolutely right. I agree with you. I just skipped that in the presentation. The scoring mechanism is based on how the admin has set up the weightages in the backend. Remember, I alluded to the admin interface where you set it up. So when you are setting up these activities and so on, you specify the weights for them. So it is a weighted score that you see at the end. Any other questions? There are some other questions I thought.
There's no more in the chat. You've picked up the Harjinder one.
Yes. Okay, somebody asked, Oksana, I'm writing to ask for your support with my research project. Okay.
Yeah, I think that was a general one from Oksana, not really a question to you.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
I think
I can talk. Go ahead.
I was going to say, if I mention about Oksana's project, it's her PhD thesis, and the last stage of it, she's hit a problem because it involved physical contact. And of course, with the virus, she can't do that. So this was a very fast way of trying to come up with an alternative to complete her PhD. And it's really to be answered by any students. Doesn't matter whether they were seriously thinking of coming to the UK, but might think of coming to the UK, etc., about what they would look for about a website. So it doesn't take very long. So if anybody's got a little bit of time to have a look at it, then please do, and encourage the students to take part in it. I think it's like another PhD I examined a few months ago. Again, they had to change the action part of the PhD quite dramatically because, again, the virus stopped things. So I think there's a lot of this going on at the moment. Could I ask a very quick question myself, because we've got 5 minutes left on your timing? I was very interested in the interaction for when you were discussing with Eleni from Finland and talking about the links and interaction with your students. How long do those interactions take? Because it's very time demanding. I think it's a brilliant idea, but it's very time demanding on the lecturer's time. So on your one-to-one discussions, how long is each discussion typically? Thank you.
Is that a question for me or
for you?
How long the interactions take with my students? Well, if they take me out for beer, they last a long time.
if you're in the online world.
Yeah, typically the online world, I do maintain office hours. Even in the industry, we do that. We maintain office hours online, and anyone is welcome to join, and they can ask questions. I'm there. So that's how typically I do these things. Pretty much every course that at least I teach, I'm sure a lot of people are doing that now. It's not like I invented this. I learned from my mentors, right? I have typically like a project. There's a heavy emphasis on project-based work in all my classes. But that also lends itself very well in an engineering domain, as you know. It's very easy to execute projects, right? It lends itself very well. And I always have group discussions. There's a weighted grade for group discussions, right? And then I give weightage to critical thinking skills and reflection and presentation. So everything is driven by those things as opposed to really saying, I'm going to give you a midterm, a final. The final is really project presentation in most of my classes. So, because project takes a lot of effort, you know that, right? When you're interacting with team and they have to upload the project status reports, they have to put out their solution to other people to critique on. So I bring all of those things to the fore online. This is not like during the pandemic. I did that for the last couple of decades. Moodle and Blackboard, all of these things existed well before, right? So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, but usually office hours online is a good idea, at least twice a week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Yeah, I'd say that that sort of echoes things that I've heard teachers say, that it's maintaining a sort of online contact with students is actually very difficult to manage in terms of their own time. I've heard people say they feel it overwhelms their life because they can't isolate one role from another.
Is that a comment or?
Oh, is it really just a comment? Yeah.
Yeah. You're asking me to comment on this, or was that your comment?
You are welcome to comment on it, Pratap.
No.
I realise it's the middle of the night where you are, though. You're probably waiting to get back to bed.
No. I'm almost a 24/7 person, so no worries on that. Yeah, it is difficult. Also, of course, you all know everything now is mobile, right? So I don't know if this kind of makes sense to you. I'm actually doing a project right now, this product development. One of the things that we have in the incentive space is every company has what are called partner account managers, because a company has many partners through who they sell their products. Now, to manage those partners, companies assign a manager to those partners. So what we are presenting to these companies now is a mobile app, collaboration app, which connects the partner account managers with the partners. Nobody is going to go online to WebEx Teams or WebEx and then try to chat with them and all that, right? In the past, the communication was either they pick up the phone and call or they send them an email. Now we are actually giving the mobile app for them. So the interaction then becomes much more meaningful and more just-in-time type of an interaction. And they love that. That's amazing, right? Now, can we do that in an education institution where a professor has, let's say, 40 students, and then the 40 students using the mobile app chat with the instructor? I don't know that. I don't know the efficacy of that yet.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment, because we've reached the end of our time? Pratap, the tool is in embryonic form at the moment, your tool. Okay? Is it still in the lab? It's not being out in the field.
No, it can be. It is a product that I'm willing to give it to academic institutions to play with it.
No, I want to say something else. We have a team working on such a tool for self-evaluation for companies. And I mean, what Harchinda, who is in the team as well, and Eleni, who you saw her earlier, we want to design such a tool, but I think I will give you some feedback on the way you did the questions, in 3 questions, you know, not interested, absolutely necessary, and things like that. I gave you some feedback about that, because we can exchange ideas.
Absolutely.
Because I think it is too crude to ask just those 3 questions. And as Harchinda mentioned, we need the scoring and the weights and all of that. So it will be good to have a chat and exchange ideas.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree. In fact, I will.
This is for industry, it's not only for education, but it could be everywhere. Yeah. Okay.
It is actually, and I'll actually give you a demo on the back-end aspect of it as an admin tool, how these things are set up. Maybe that will give you more insights.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
And for Oksana, I think we should all help her. If she wants help, we should all help her. And
sure.
Including Pratap, because you are always helping the students and sponsoring students as well, which I forgot to mention in my introduction.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud that I learned a lot from you, and that is how it should be, because I didn't say that was one of my PhD students. I'm very proud of what he achieved. After that PhD, he went and got another. So I, as a lifelong learner, thank you very much, and I wish you all the best, and let us keep in touch. Okay?
Thank you. Bye all.
Bye.